Welcome to the program, everyone. Today from Manhattan, we'll be speaking with Phyllis Lee, smart, savvy, dynamic investment banker. Phyllis, welcome to global.사인즈.
안녕하세요, Bruce. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Phyllis, the CDC said that even if you've been in contact with a confirmed COVID-19 person, you don't have to be tested if you're asymptomatic. Can you tell us about the corona situation in New York City, please?
So New York at one point was at the center of the coronavirus, but now I think New York is one of the states that is handling the virus relatively well. In July, New York entered into phase 4 of its 4-phase reopening process, which meant low-risk outdoor activities like zoos and gardens could now open. Testing has also become much more accessible, and the positivity rate has gone down drastically from 50% in April to now it's less than 1% now. New Yorkers are doing a good job of complying to the safety measures, given that masks are required to do everything here. So I can't say that the outlook is bright, but I would say New York is handling the situation relatively well.
That's good news. Now, Governor Cuomo recently introduced corona regulation measures for shopping malls and stores in New York City. How are New Yorkers reacting to Governor Cuomo's somewhat strict regulations?
Governor Cuomo has taken a very data-driven approach to the coronavirus, and he has often referred to South Korea as a data point. Many people were upset about how strict his regulations were, especially those who work in the restaurant, retail, and tourism industries. From their point of view, the curve had stayed flat and schools were reopening, so they didn't understand why indoor dining and shopping and gyms were still closed. For people who were able to work from home, a lot of them left New York to quarantine in other places with looser regulations so that they could enjoy a greater sense of normalcy. There are also people who think that Governor Cuomo's regulations were appropriate given New York's dense population. But with all that said, I think most people are very excited that New York's economy is slowly reopening.
Phyllis, you grew up in Louisiana, which is an extremely conservative state. Can you tell us about the corona situation in Louisiana? And can you compare and contrast the Louisiana governor and the New York governor's responses to the corona-19 situation?
So fun fact, Louisiana's Governor John Bel Edwards is actually a Democrat. So Governor Edwards and Governor Cuomo both took a multi-phase reopening process. But the difference is that Louisiana's phases were much less restrictive than those of New York. So for example, phase 1 in New York applied to construction workers, curbside retail, and agricultural services, whereas phase 1 in Louisiana meant indoor dining, gyms, and malls could already open. And those are the things that only just recently opened in New York even after weeks of being in phase 4. I would say another difference is their enforcement of the safety measures. So in New York, masks are required to do almost everything, whether you are picking up a coffee or going into a retail store. But in Louisiana, the safety regulations were treated more like recommendations.
I see. Now, after graduating from a prestigious and elite college, you started out in consulting and then switched to investment banking. What made you make the switch?
So when I was in consulting, I had the opportunity to work on the strategy and operations for several large cap M&A deals. And it's really helped me to see the big value creation opportunities that M&A provides for companies, whether they are being acquired by a strategic or by a financial sponsor. So I realized I love the transaction space and that I wanted to learn everything that I needed to know about deal making, whether it was valuation, structuring a transaction, and execution. And so the switch to investment banking made a lot of sense, and I've been enjoying my work ever since.
Phyllis, in front of the stock exchange, there's an iconic statue of the fearless girl, where once Wall Street was completely male-centered. We're starting to see women executives in senior roles, and it looks as though women are finally gaining a foothold and climbing up the ranks. As a young Asian woman working on Wall Street, what difficulties and challenges did you encounter?
To this day, Wall Street is still predominantly white male. It is true that there are more women in senior positions, such as the recently announced new Citigroup CEO, who is now a woman. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, but I think there's more work to be done. In the past 2.5 years I have been in investment banking, I have more often than not been the only woman in the client room, and sometimes even the only Asian person in the room. And I've also received work emails that said lady and gentleman. And I realized that this gender imbalance can actually be an opportunity for me to stand out and make my voice more heard. So it's encouraged me to contribute more to my deals and to be more assertive about any professional goals I am seeking. In terms of challenges, I think one challenge for me is social small talk. In the pre-COVID days, when we would all sit in the bullpen, I have seen male senior bankers go to male analysts' desks and talk about golf and fantasy football. And while those conversations may seem trivial, they're still a form of relationship building. And I find that those opportunities have really paid off for those male analysts. And I think that given the rise of the Me Too movement, I think many senior bankers who tend to be male are very cautious and sensitive about approaching female subordinates. So I think as I pursue a career on Wall Street, I've learned that it's incredibly important to be smart about who I work with and how I work with them, to communicate clearly and assertively. And so hopefully, I hope that this can help me reach seniority in my career as well.
Well, let's hope that things improve. Now, how did the coronavirus affect Wall Street's working environment and subsequently New York's economy?
So the coronavirus has made Wall Street's working environment tougher. A lot of senior bankers saw the coronavirus as an opportunity to capture more market share. So as a result, working hours definitely got worse, given that everyone knew we were at home. So I think it was also interesting to see firms execute virtual internships and virtual training sessions for incoming analysts. And I think it was initially a struggle, learning how to work without access to the Bloomberg terminal or printers and copiers. But I think at this point, most people have become acclimated.
Well, that's very positive news. How has the COVID-19 situation affected the New York real estate market?
So the New York real estate market is definitely getting softer. It was recently announced that there are over 15,000 residential apartments available for listing, as many people are working from home and sometimes even leaving New York to move to the suburbs. The commercial real estate market has also been very difficult, given that a lot of small businesses have been unable to reach their pre-COVID sales numbers and meet New York rent. Commercial real estate in Koreatown and Manhattan has also been hit very hard, where first floor restaurants pay rent as much as $70,000 a month. And because restaurants are still not fully reopened, they have not been able to meet the sales to pay rent for several months.
Phyllis, now the U.S. presidential elections are only a few weeks away. Who do you think will win between Biden versus Trump?
It appears that there is an increasing consensus on racial, social, and economic equality. Yet at the same time, there are signs of rising fatigue associated with that social unrest. And I don't think we can quite yet ignore the multiple voices of silent Trumpers. So that being said, I think it will be very difficult to see in which direction voters will feel. And I think it will be a very close election in a weak field of candidates.
Now, finally, Phyllis, can you recommend any U.S. and Korean stocks to our investors today?
I realize that a lot of people have recommended Samsung Electronics, and it is easy to do so. I would also like to recommend Samsung Electronics. This comes after they signed large contracts with big tech companies. So most notably, they have signed an agreement with Qualcomm to produce its Snapdragon 4 series. They also signed an agreement with IBM to produce its Power 10 chip. And also they have an agreement with NVIDIA to produce its RTX 3000 series GPUs. I would also like to recommend lithium-ion battery makers LG Chemical and Samsung SDI. They are very large suppliers to Tesla. So for U.S. stocks, despite the current sell-off, I would like to recommend Amazon and Tesla. E-commerce and electric cars have been doing very well in this volatile environment.
Phyllis Lee, savvy investment banker, I wish you continuing success in your career. Thank you for joining us today on Global Signs.
감사합니다.
Phyllis recommends Samsung Electronics. She recommends Samsung Electronics because Samsung has been on a roar, signing deals with major high-tech companies like Qualcomm, IBM, and NVIDIA. She also recommends lithium-ion battery makers, Samsung SDI and LG Chemical. For U.S. stocks, she recommends Amazon and Tesla, despite the recent sell-off. I want to thank everyone for joining us today on Global Signs. Until we next meet, please be healthy and be safe. Thank you very much.